Hello, if your New Year's resolution is to read more classic books or to try classic books, then here are 10 of the easiest ones to read. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. This is English Nerd, and today I wanted to share with you 10 of the easiest classics to read. These are not necessarily the shortest, some of them are quite short, but I did a different video with some of the classic books that you can read in one day, and I'll link that to this video. But this one is more about reading level, the complexity of the sentences and the imagery and that kind of thing. So if you're new to reading classic books, it can be a learning curve. You don't want to jump right into Shakespeare, for example, unless you're watching it, I would say, because the language is just really difficult. But these 10 have really accessible language. Maybe the deeper meaning is not immediately clear, but they're not that difficult to read. So, number 1 is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupery. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name, but it is a lovely children's book, but really I think it has a lot more impact for adults than for children. So I would definitely recommend reading The Little Prince. Next up is Anything by Hemingway. The Sun Also Rises would be one that I've read, and really anything by him, the short stories, the novels, have a very basic reading level to them. Old Man at the Sea, that kind of thing. So if you want to try Ernest Hemingway's work, then anything by him is going to fall into this category. Next is 1984 by George Orwell. That is one that I assume you've heard about because it tends to be referenced, especially around elections and things like that, with the increased surveillance, and there are often connections made to the dystopian work 1984. But the reading level, again, is pretty basic, and so if you want to read it for yourself and see what people are talking about, then go ahead. That's my third suggestion. Next up is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. This one is a play, not a novel, but it is really accessible. There's a lot of banter. It's funny enough that it's funny even when you read it instead of seeing it as a play. You do have to keep track of the different identities of the characters and things like that, but Oscar Wilde makes it pretty easy to do. Next is Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is a poem. It's a poem that's about 15 pages long, maybe, but it's considered a classic in its own right. So Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. That one is quite easy to read as well. It's an adventure story, and it's kind of a crazy supernatural romp through the oceans. So go ahead and try that one if you want to. Next up is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. It's another dystopian style novel, but the descriptions are beautiful, and yet it's not overdone. It's the story of boys who get stranded on this island without any adults and the chaos that ensues. It does not go well at all, but if a beautiful island setting and a chaotic story sounds interesting to you, then go ahead and try Lord of the Flies. Next up, I have Little Women by Luisa May Alcott. It is, of course, a lovely classic about a family, the March family, and the triumphs and tragedies that they go through. If you're not familiar with it, then I would definitely recommend you check it out. The original, there have been some movies, of course, made in recent years, but that one is also pretty accessible in terms of just the reading level itself. Next up is One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. It's a Russian literature book, which means there are some Russian names which take a minute to get used to, but other than that, it's very straightforward descriptions of what is going on in this prison in Russia. So you get a very realistic view of life in a Siberian prison, and the language is not very fancy. It's not very emotional even. although you're looking at something that could be very emotionally charged, it's quite straightforward. So if you want to try some Russian literature, then that is an accessible place to begin. Next up is another just whole author category, kind of like Ernest Hemingway, Emily Dickinson. Her poetry is, for the most part, really easy to read. Maybe it takes a bit to uncover the different layers, but if you're not into uncovering different layers, that's perfectly fine. Or if you are, then give Emily Dickinson a try. Her poems tend to be short. There are lots of dashes, but the language is not very complicated. And then finally, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe is also a pretty easy read. You have a lot of African names, so again, that takes a little bit of getting used to, but the language itself, the sentence structure, is straightforward as this story is unfolding. So there you go. There are 10 of the easiest classic books to read if you are a beginner or you just don't want something that is harder to understand or get into. Hopefully this was helpful. I know that there are lots of others that I could have added, so feel free to add those in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It is very, very helpful for me. All right, bye.